Hello, everyone. This is a very beautiful crowd, Victoria. Thank you so much. I just want to say that I really value Michelle's practice, and it's like a total honour to be part of this. And I'd say if you just asked me to do anything, I'd say yeah. And this lineup of speakers else is very impressive, so I feel deadly to be part of it. But it's nice sometimes. Okay, so I'm going to open that PowerPoint. I did attempt to narrow things down a little bit, as you can see, not very well. Good. So first of all, just to say that I guess the basis of my practice and everything that I do is relationships, and it's really about having thinking about what it means to have a heart-led practice in a very upside-down world, and that kind of translates into thinking about what we value and what we don't value, and what that means across all the different places that I work. And for my little head, the easiest way for me to think about what I do is it's this like little mycelium of ecosystems of one-to-one relationships and collaborations across places and timelines and archives and worlds. So I'm from Kerry in the south of Ireland, so obviously land is going to feature heavily today. So land, networks of solidarity, and seizing the means of production, and thinking of these things as an embodied feeling. So what it feels like to seize the means of production, what it feels like to build other worlds and be involved in networks of solidarity, and what the ground beneath us feels like. So what is it, the grief, what is the trauma, what is the good stuff, what is all in the layers of the soil underneath us. So I'm going to go between timelines and projects and spaces, just to first kind of say that I guess over the last few years, especially since I did the newspaper Gravity Express, which there are copies of over here, it was really, I guess, the importance of understanding my own archive. So my own archive of where I've come from, why I do what I do, and how that impacts into the kind of community-led archiving and the archiving that I do in general. So where it all began for me and my socially engaged practice was starting Nom Nom Cafe, which was a social space outside Kenmare in County Kerry. So this is, say, the ancestral home, that like farm cottage that I turned into a cafe. And really, if you look at everything I've ever done, it looks like a bit of a version of a cafe. So I think it's always interesting just to see where things come from. And that, for me, I guess, generally I'm always interested in breaking down silos and disciplines across everything. And I think you have a space that becomes very visible, because on a Monday you could have an open mic night, on a Tuesday a reader group, on a Thursday an open mic night, whatever you're having yourself. And that really taught me, I guess, a lot about when you actually have space and can give it over to people, what it can do. But of course, it was also, as I went on in my practice, I worked a lot in spatial justice in city centres, and was very focused on the politics and the systemic violence that happens within our city centres around regeneration processes and things like that, and was very understood the politics of that very far away from where I was from, before I kind of started to understand, I guess, more the politics and the violence that exists within the land of rural Ireland. So that's not actually my father, that's Maverick Gutierrez, who starred in the film of The Fields, John B. Keane. And I always reference, especially when I present internationally, when I'm kind of explaining processes to do with land, I'm always like, there's a film you need to watch called Field. And I think it's actually really understanding our relationship to land and private property, and where that comes from is really important first, before you go anywhere near thinking about, well, should any connection own the land? And why I bring that up was because I lost the cafe and all that social space that I set up, and plus the land was given to the brother. And that's a very typical kind of Kerry story, which then, but is actually a big kind of learning in terms of your own relationship to land, of what you think about in relation to then the work that we do in other places and communities. And a thing that I think about a lot is Ceshna Talún, which is the land question. And I did an event in 2022 with an artist called Deirdre O'Mahony, who's fabulous, about the land question, and got to finally kind of focus about this idea of patriarchy, ego brur talamh, so the patriarchy at work on the land. So that's, I guess, my background in terms of rural Ireland, and kind of thinking about looking back at that more recently. Obviously, land is going to feature in everything, but networks of solidarity is, I guess for me, it's always about, if I'm thinking about how do we create spaces for collective grief and for struggle and for, I guess, understanding where we've come from in the archives that have both been erased and the archives that are being built, it's always about connecting networks of solidarity across place-based struggles. And for me, a bit of a game changer for this was during COVID-19, when I was doing the Just City residency, which I called How Much Is Enough, which is the booklet that Michelle referenced that's in the Art Centre. I developed I developed networks of solidarity between Dublin 8 and the unceded land of Gadigal country, which is also known as Sydney in Australia. And we've developed this 4-part series, Between Our Minds, Through Our Stories, on the airwaves and in the roots. And for me, this was really just looking at how do we, not to create universal narratives, but actually look at, like, you know, the threads and similarities and differences across place-based struggles, and use this as a way of, I guess, building, but first of all, actually valuing these people who hold so much knowledge and information and do the day-to-day care work on the ground. So I was working in Dublin 8 with all these like epic revolutionary community workers and activists, and Enya, who was also born in Kimere, County Kerry, who lives in Sydney, was working with amazing elders and filmmakers and activists. And we were just like, well, you're working with loads of legends there and I'm working with loads of legends here. Let's bring them together. And a lot of special moments happened in that. But first, just one in particular was in between, with Between Our Minds. Auntie Rhonda, who's an incredible elder, was responding to Rita Fagan, who was talking about St. Michael's Estate in Dublin 8, which has been a very like contested area in Dublin 8 around just the usual old story of turning public land into private property, and that struggle continues. But you know, she said, "Oh, it's really interesting what Rita's talking about, and you know, like who owns this land? Who owns the land anyway?" And she was referencing then her daughter, who's a singer, and her song, which was always was, always will be Aboriginal land. So I think no matter what we're doing with networks of solidarity across place-based struggles, if there's stories, it's the connections between our minds, it's in the reeds, and it's on the airwaves, which is also connected to seizing the means of production as well. So today I'm just kind of touching on, I guess you're getting a little just insight into head and the the most recent projects and the things that I'm thinking about most. So Revolutionary Archives, the projects that I did super recently between the Isle of Egg in the northwest of Scotland and Govan Hill Bats. And this was kind of another bit of a game changer for me in terms of thinking about community-led archiving and really actually working one-to-one. So when I was asked to do this commission, and there's the potential of working with lots of different people, I was like, no, I'll just work one-to-one with leaders who were part of the buyout of this community island in '97, which is an absolute incredible story. And I'll work with some of the key leaders who were part of the occupation of Govan Hill Bats in Glasgow, which was a 140-day occupation, which was the longest occupation of a public building in the UK. And I guess it's really thinking about, there's these absolutely incredible moments of history that because people are working so hard on the ground and constantly being burnt out, there isn't the time or space to archive them. and the actual individual story of these people who are really doing the work is kind of often lost. So for me, I often think of my work as this idea of archiving the archivist. So thinking of these leaders as archivists in themselves, and that they're holding all this knowledge and all these networks, and actually the time to value those one-to-one, those individual stories is really important, because in our social movements and what we do, everyone has a different story within what's happening. So as opposed to looking at trying to get this like collective story of that time, I worked one-to-one with different people. So this is Paula Larkin, who's the archivist in the Govan Hill Baths now, and what she is wearing is also I'm wearing my leggings, and this is all part of this project. So what she really pulled from the archive was the actual rotas of that time. So the rotas, as you can kind of see in the background of these prints, go from like 6 a.m. to 6 a.m. and they're 140 days, and everyone filled out the names in these rotas for the picket line. And that's the labour, that's the work, and it's the day-to-day, often labour of care that isn't the thing that is platformed. So that's why for her jacket, you focused on Idea Barbarova, and these jackets are reversible. So this is Maggie Fife, who's an absolute legend. There's a really good podcast on the internet, which is the story of the power of the egg story. So when I was on egg, I was kind of really in conversations with the same people that I was working with. And this particularly was a very special moment because it was around Maggie Fife's kitchen table, which is where so much of the organising and work happened for them to buy back the Isle of Egg in '97, which was after decades and decades of them being just totally fucked over by landlords. And so that's, on one side is the Isle of Egg jacket, or the Isle of Egg and story, and on the other side is the Govan Hill Baths. So, Michelle, I'll get you to just throw something at me, mum and Paul. So in terms of what it means to make with people and to build other worlds and to seize the means of production, I think it's also important to think about what nourishes you as well as what nourishes the collective. So it's this constant, I guess, intersection between self-care and collective care, as well as, I guess, valuing the individuals within the collective. So for me, how I ended up in printmaking, first was because it was really access to process and thinking through process, and that idea of direct theory. So thinking about all this stuff and theories and everything in the world, but actually through your hands, the making of prints for me was the kind of, I guess, the gateway into the mediation to print. And then that moved on. So, and it's interesting because, there was, I guess, more abstract in the earlier days where I was kind of thinking about structures inside my head and structures outside of my head. And then obviously everyone comes to the same conclusion that it turns out capitalism is the problem the whole time. Not you at all. It's not your fault. So then I guess this is where I ended up in publishing in a very DIY way. So these were the first kind of publications. There's probably only 100 of them that folded out into posters. And I guess often when I'm working across a lot of like organising and activist groups, and I would always say that like the revolution does need to be really good crack. Like it's hard, but it is the nurturing, and that actually seizing the means of production is a good time. So this is my mother in the middle, and this is my master's show, which was actually just blueprints of my notebooks and research and screen prints, and people in and it's also like demystifying this kind of like the idea of an artist being special or anything like that. Is that like I allow people to basically screen print on the work and then take it away. So that's probably also my mother for the first time understanding what printmaking is after listening to it for many years. And then that developed. So just to talk a little bit about publishing. There's the big books, like you talked about, my first child, Dirty Words, which took a couple of years, and now we're working on another very big book with Megs Morley on the artist-led archive, which is like over 220 artist-led initiatives in it, which is taking many years. So I find that at the same time as that, there also needs to be the kind of the more activist kind of quick print that you need to do. So we often then have projects then that have quite a quick turnaround, and we just create platforms for artist-led, for organising and amazing grassroots groups. So for this, we produced the MASI, so the Movement of Asylum Seeker Ireland's journal. So this is From Fear to Liberty, the most recent one that we did. And part of that was, we weren't editing or had anything to do with the content. We just got the content, produced the book, and then worked to create this big kind of event in the Art Museum of Modern Art in Dublin. And just that, like, for me, it's all connected. So, like, you need the books, you need the social spaces, you need the social media, you need food, you need all the things, and that they can all work together. So there's no point in doing a book if it doesn't get to anyone. So it's these networks of solidarity are always interconnected. This is the book that's over in the Arts Centre, so I won't give any spoiler alerts. It's also, the PDF is online. This is just to give you an insight of probably what the inside of my head could look like to your right. But that was Studio 468 in Dublin 8, which I got to be embedded in for 2 years. And that really was where this idea, I guess, Stuart Hall especially would talk about the living archive and that in a way that I love, and it kind of becomes this living archive that, yes, you have from material, but it's also this archive, I guess, between arts and places and time that is really about the people and how people activate those things. I'm just kind of doing a little quick insight into the different ways of publishing. So the People's Kitchen, which is a project that I've done since 2015, has kind of gone like from being one thing to ending up being really about soil and compost and really nerdy compost and food policy related stuff. But I produced these kind of, I guess, more DIY zines related to this that kind of, I guess, share the story of the projects and the people, and is more connected, I guess, to the kind of the healing on the soil and the stuff that I would have talked about earlier, and actually looking at, okay, soil in a way is the black gold and is the thing that we need to, is going to be one of our biggest issues. So I think there's always that thing of the building and the dismantling at the same time. So we also need to get our hands in the earth and the printing presses and all things. And I will finish on MAD, which is the mobile archive device that Ciaran Smyth, who I did Gravity Express, is designing me travelling archive suitcases, because I now just go around with regular suitcases, bring archives to places. No, but in a way, for me, the kind of the archive and the living archive is a way of threading and bringing all these different elements together and being a way of kind of showing other people's practices and ways of doing stuff, and then just building and building all of that. Yeah, thanks very much.